Hi guys, let's go watching. Just before that, subscribe and enjoy yourself.
Love is the most beautiful feeling in all the universes. It's a feeling that puts loved ones through unbearable trials. A fierce feeling that cannot be put into words. The young person has written the same letter hundreds of times, but unfortunately it never reaches the recipient. Since it wasn't normal love, it was a witch's love, and it can't be explained in words. It's not like humans. A young and very pretty young girl was helping an old woman. Because of her fierce beauty, her peers called the beauty a witch behind her eyes. As soon as they saw her, they started pointing their fingers at her and saying she was witchcrafting again. The young girls saw the blonde person when she was helping her grandmother. They knew it was Brad's grandmother, and they also knew that she'd been getting worse and worse lately as she was sick, so she had come to the witch. Young boys witnessed what was going on and briefly thought to defend the blonde girl. One of the boys said she knew healing herbs and decided to help her grandmother. He also told them to stop their unnecessary conversation. Philippa began to tease Mikkel. The girl kept saying that since he was on her side, he was her prince. The young boy asked Philippa to stop teasing him, but she didn't listen to him and continued. The other boy cheered Philippa on. One of the girls was saying that the blonde maiden was very fond of the young boy, and he probably wants to burn with her at the stake. Mikkel heard their conversation and frantically yelled for them to stop since they were grown up, and there was no need to tease each other like that. Mikkel told his friends that Cordelia knows everything there is to know about medicinal herbs. However, in this era, if you are very beautiful, intelligent, or fiercely talented at something, you will be mistaken for a witch. Cordelia is one of the most attractive young ladies in their settlement. Many boys her age, as soon as they see the blonde beauty, immediately start drooling and look at her with such an expression on their faces, as if they want to possess her. But there are two young men who don't look at her with such a fierce desire to possess her. They despise young guys who can't contain their emotions. There are also young girls in the small town who are fiercely jealous of Cordelia. Their envy grows into anger and ridicule. It's also not uncommon for a girl to be traumatized. Philippa is one of the ones who constantly teases the blonde girl. She doesn't go past and is constantly teasing her. Looking at the girl, you can tell she's more suited for the role of a witch. The young boy met Philippa and said that the Baron had ordered him to make candles. Philippa said it was very good, as he could live on that money for 2 years. The boy said that this money would go to pay his tax. When he got closer, he saw what the girl was doing. She threw tomatoes at the door. Philippa said he frightened her and asked if he had come to the witch to get wax for the candles. He looked at her in confusion and said he had come for the wax. The boy looked at Philippa and asked where she got the tomatoes, for he guessed they were from a field full of ladies. Philippa confirmed his words. She said she swiped them and pointed out that they were ripe and very juicy. The boy was furious at her action. He asked her why she was throwing their door, as he was sure it was very ugly and wasteful. The woman was furious when she saw how the tomatoes had been maliciously spoiled. She was frantically yelling at the blonde girl. The woman was sure she had done it on purpose. Cordelia in turn screamed that she didn't do it, and she didn't understand what even happened. But the woman was persistent. She accused her of stealing and also of vilely damaging her property. She said all the facts were in plain sight as her bag ended up on the girl's desk, and she purposely smeared the tomatoes against the door. Everyone stood and watched the woman fight with the girl. Everyone present whispered and was at a loss as to how a girl could do such a thing. They were convinced that it was the most unmitigated waste. She was a scapegoat for them. It was Mikkel who came to Cordelia's defense. The girl was very surprised, but at the same time very glad that he had sided with her. But unfortunately, since everyone gathered rallied against her, he didn't help her much. When just one person becomes a scapegoat in the eyes of the others, nothing will help them anymore, except one thing, to disappear from their sight. People are devious, and before they can get rid of one scapegoat, they move on to the next weaker link in their chain. The man was listing all the items that were on sale. He hesitated when he saw that Madame Vicky was low on tomatoes. He told her about it. She replied that a girl had destroyed all of her tomato stockpile. He said she had to catch the culprit of the problem and checked with her to see if she could handle it. All the people in the marketplace were whispering about Cordelia. They were excited and at a loss as to how she could show her face in public after the incident. The young girls also supported the criticism of their elders and condemned the girl who was not guilty of anything. The men were discussing everything that was going on. One of the grown men told his little friend that he should go and do some candle making. Young said he needed to wait for the mold to harden and also needed to finish the candlesticks and decorations for the lamp. The man clarified if he needed to coat everything in silver and said he could help him. The young man was a little surprised, but thanked him for his help. The man told the boy not to be shy and to ask for help if he needs it. The other men said the boy had talent present and they had high hopes for him. The young man only laughed in response. Philippa threw tomatoes at the tree. The boy said Mr. Beetle set aside a day's tax for the full lady. The red-haired girl said she could do it at least every day. He was surprised by her act and asked why she was doing it. He also said she could ignore her since she hates her so much, and asked what she gets out of it, adding that she's making things worse for those who are already in a bad situation. She looked at him with contempt and said he could do nothing but talk about it, and called him one-armed. The boy was a one-armed candle maker, one less arm, and he's already doing worse. So his candles are only good for the pigsty. Everyone in the town knew it. After the witch, he's second on the list, a scapegoat for all the residents. Colin stood staring out the window enigmatically. Men came to him and asked where the silver candlesticks were, for they wanted to look at him. Colin said they were on a table somewhere. The men were puzzled because they had not seen them. The young man was as puzzled as they were, for he looked and said the candles were gone too. The men asked where he had put them. The young man began to remember where he had been all day and where he had gone. Colin said he went to the Cordley house to get some decorative flowers. The men looked amongst themselves, fear and anger in their eyes. People went to the orphan's house and saw a terrible picture. One of the men said there were candlesticks and candles lying on the ground, and they were all ruined. It takes a whole week to make new ones. He was at a loss as the tax had to be paid tomorrow. The man knew that the Baron was impatient, and he could also sentence everyone to death. The people of the small town were shocked. They didn't realize who had done all this. One of the ladies saw the blonde young girl and grabbed her by the hair. She said she was guilty of all their sins. The woman shouted frantically that she would only bring sorrow and misery to all the residents. Unable to endure such a spectacle, a young man interceded for her. He yelled that she had had enough, and he would not tolerate this abuse of an innocent girl. All the people of the town blamed her for all their troubles. Young Mikael took her side, saying she wasn't at fault and that they had no proof. The young girls were screaming that it was all her fault and hiding behind a man. They claimed that Cordelia was very cowardly, and because of her fear, she enslaved him. Residents did not stop throwing accusations in her direction, and also some individuals turned to insults. It wasn't just the poor girl that the men were frantically yelling at. They disturbed the peace of the one-armed fry and demanded that he say something, since all his labors had been destroyed by the blonde maiden. The man said the man had every right to be angry and give the girl what she deserved. Colin stood beside the red-haired girl and said he didn't think the blonde girl had done it all. He knew for certain that all the shenanigans were Philippa's fault, since he's seen her sabotage more than once. The girl looked at him with a furious expression, but later only smiled. Philippa walked over to Colin, discreetly took a knife, and used his hand to stab herself. She yelped as he caught her off guard, and made her terrible secret public. Residents were perplexed by what was happening. They were scared, surprised, angry, and at the same time glad that they had found the witch. Looking at them, Philippa said she was a true witch. The girl decided to have a little fun for the last time and scare the people of the small town. She said they were a little spoiled and not good for eating, but she could take quantity in exchange for quality. The young man said they wouldn't let her do anything or hurt anyone. All the residents supported his words and said they were outnumbered and could handle her. They were screaming to kill her, while the men went on the attack against the witch. Women and young girls were discussing the blonde girl. In a burst of emotion, they said that she had done nothing wrong and was very good. She doesn't look like a witch at all. The real witch did everything on purpose to fool them and slander the blonde maiden. The inhabitants massacred her in a fit of furious anger. Men and women thanked the young boy who had helped them deal with the witch. After the massacre of the witch, some said they needed a drink. Others said they should tell the church to give them an honorary degree and medals there. There were also those who said everyone needs to calm down as tomorrow is tax day. One of the men said that the Baron was sure to like the news, and he would tell him all about it tomorrow. The blonde witch came to her destination. Looking around, she told Philippa to climb out a little more carefully, The girl was telling the one to take her hand. She asked Philippa if she could use magic since she was buried very deep. Philippa said she didn't need to use magic, since there's a risk of her being exposed too. She also said that little Lily could help her. Lily said she doesn't want to help a master who makes his servant do strange things. The blonde maiden said that Lily had every right to be angry at the moment, adding that Philippa shouldn't have gotten this far. Philippa was a little perplexed and didn't understand what she could do in this situation that would suit the blonde girl. After all, she knew she was madly attracted to the young man, and she had to help her. The blonde witch said she understood, but it was a very difficult situation, and she could look for another way. She knew Philippa had been hurt, and she hated that very much. Philippa said that everything has already been done and nothing can be changed. They chatted, and Philippa reassured her friend by telling her that they were celebrating and would not come to their house for the time being. Their conversation was interrupted. They were startled to see who had come to them. A young boy came to them. He just stood there looking at them. The blonde maiden grabbed the knife. The boy asked her to calm down, saying he wouldn't do anything. Then she grabbed him by the throat in a fit of rage. Philippa yelled for her to calm down as he wouldn't hurt them. But the witch said he had seen them and needed to be killed immediately. Philippa looked at her and said it was just a boy, and he wouldn't tell anyone anything, and asked her to believe her. The girl looked at him with contempt and let go of the knife. I left a bruise on his neck as a souvenir. Cordelia asked her sister to leave the village quickly, as the people from the church would be arriving soon. Philippa said she knew their plans. She assured her that she would handle it and everything would be fine. Colin stood and watched their conversation. His neck was very sore from the witch's touch. Cordelia, in tears, said that if Philippa left now, it would be many decades before they would see each other again. She promised her that next time she would be burned at the stake instead. Philippa looked at her and told her not to say that. After all, the witch is still very young. Cordelia had suffered enough to get her fortune. She also told her that human life is very short and she needs to be happy, to live a life with the person you love. Cordelia said she would try to live it well. Hugging each other, they said goodbye. Cordelia walked away and turned around and looked at them for a long time yet. Philippa looked at the one-armed boy and asked if his neck hurt. Colin looked at her perplexed. The girl said, "Cordelia is very strong. With her magic, she healed him. After the healing, she looked at him and told him to come home, since he's too young to go out with them at night." He was a little confused and yelled at her to wait and not to leave without him, for she was using him. Philippa said she used him because he was just a good boy who was looking to prove the blonde girl's innocence. But unfortunately, it didn't work out, and she helped expose the truth to people. They stood and argued for a long time. She told him to go home to the village. But the man was angry and said he wasn't going back. Colin didn't understand why he had to return to such an unpleasant place. Philippa said it would be very dangerous for him to walk alone at night, and reminded him of the fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel. Philippa had told him that everything would be okay in their small town now. He was surprised. She said that their feast over the witch's murder would only last a couple days, and then everything would be as it was before. Philippa said they would fake it and forget what happened and find another scapegoat. The young boy yelled that people don't change and things will only get worse. Philippa screamed in rage that this couldn't be happening and things would get much better than they were. She said she guarantees it and he can trust her. The boy was confused. Colin says she's a witch and he can't really trust her. He asked her why she thought it would only get better. She looked at him happily and told him that the wicked witch was no more. So, it would be fine, and added that he could quickly return to the village. Philippa said he could have a little fun and take a few strands of her hair, telling all the residents that he caught her running away and killed her. Colin looked her over and said he didn't want anything from her. He grabbed her familiar and walked away from her. The witch yelled in her wake that he couldn't do that since it was her familiar. He did leave, though. She yelled back at him for a long time to take her hair or her nails, but only gave her her familiar. Philippa was wandering in the twilight of the night. She heard the boy's voice. He told her from afar that she was late. Philippa was furious and didn't understand how it was that he had come before her. He said that this time she ran in such a hurry that she even inserted her familiar behind her. He tossed the familiar into her hands. Philippa caught sight of him and asked in bewilderment why he was following her. She said he could have stayed in the other villages they were in, and also asked him not to make life difficult for her and to go their separate ways. He said she said it repeatedly, but it doesn't sound very believable. At each new village as they walked, she told him that he should leave her and settle down somewhere else. She screamed at him that he was just a child, and he should settle down somewhere and live a normal human life. Colin just looked at her and said he had no family. He's an orphan and he can do whatever he wants. They arrived in one of the new cities and went to a hotel. Philippa wanted to rent a room for them to live in comfort. The woman looked at her and asked how she was coping with 2 children. She knew it was hard with one alone, and the girl had 2. Philippa became embarrassed and said she did, adding that they slept outside for a couple days and said that any discount would be very significant to them. The woman said she would see what could be done now. The young man asked the witch how much the witch had bargained with her. The witch said the woman turned out to be very nice and saved them a lot of money. Colin looked at her and asked if she was really sensitive about money. The witch said that considering that her alchemical abilities were negligible, she needed to save money. Colin asked what she was good at then. The witch hesitated, not knowing what to answer. Colin looked at Philippa and said that she was only good at being able to manipulate people like him. Colin wanted to leave. Philippa asked him where he wanted to go. Thoth looked at her and said he wanted to go outside and manifest you since she didn't need him here. She looked at him pitifully and begged him to stay and not leave her. They slept together in the same bed. The young man couldn't sleep for a long time. He was angry as well as confused and decided to retire to the ground to sleep. The young witch woke up and saw him sleeping on the floor. She thought it was no wonder now that she had been cold at night. They sat at the table and ate. The hostess of the establishment approached them and said they could have a tour of the city, since they have a lot of booths. The witch thanked her, saying she had been there many times and her son hadn't been there yet so they could go. Colin sat and listened, as the men who listened to their conversation wondered how they could be related if they didn't even look alike. Their mini-family was discussed, and said they couldn't be a family as the young man is very mature, and the mother is very young. The young boy held his little sister in his arms and said that Philippa was very bad at acting. The witch was furious and said he could not mock her and her teachers. The young man was a little puzzled, the fact that she had teachers. The witch decided to show him her teachers. She brought him to the play. After watching the play, he couldn't understand what the woman had learned. Philippa looked at him with tearful eyes and said the play was delightful. She learned a lot. Colin didn't like the whole performance and was disappointed. The young man asked how could a witch learn anything from humans. Philippa said that since she was a witch, she could learn a lot. First of all, she should learn to blend in with people in a crowd. He was puzzled. Colin kept telling her that witches prey on humans and they couldn't live together in peace. Philippa said it wasn't them hunting them, it was the people hunting the poor witches. People are afraid of all things obscure. Hearing her words made him very angry as he knew what she was doing in his small town, and decided to leave. Lily asked why Mistress was allowing him to be around them. The little girl said he had a very hard character. The witch said her magic doesn't work on him for some unknown reason. She tried memory distortion, visual hallucination, but nothing worked. Philippa thought maybe he had some sort of ability or special resistance to magic. Lily asked, why not just run away from him completely then? After all, she can fly away from him on her broomstick or travel to any other time and place or country or dimension in just a few seconds. The boy sat in his room and reflected on what had happened. He ran away, but when he realized he had nowhere to go, he had to come back. Since he was just a kid, Lily went upstairs, picked up the boy, and together they went downstairs to the table. They were gobbling. The witch was very clumsy. Philippa spilled the drink on the table, and Colin began wiping her hand. They all looked at them and asked which one was the mom and which one was the little kid. Philippa laughed and said her boy was very clever. The young man was very angry as he had to play the little clumsy boy and also her son. Colin was angry more than once when he lived with a witch, but still stayed with her and didn't leave. He grew up and practiced the candle-making craft. The witch was resting on the bed enjoying cookies and tea. Philippa said that this time they would stay in town and live after all. At her words, the boy and Lily were shocked. Philippa and the boy lived together for 5 years. The young man grew, but the witch never changed. She was very young, just like the first day. The innkeeper said the boy was very mature, so it was time for him to live in another room. The hostess's son asked the young man if they were really mother and son. The woman told him to let him watch his words. Everyone in the inn wondered how it could be that the woman hadn't aged a single day since they'd settled here. The hostess said it wasn't their problem and not to touch her visitors, since she knew how hard it was to raise children alone. She said she raised the young boy on her own and didn't expect to hear him say such things about other people. He said he wasn't the only one who thought so. Everyone else did too, but decided to keep quiet. She said he had no feelings, no decency, and asked him to shut up. Also told all visitors to mind their own business. The guests quickly scattered. The boy said he wanted to change rooms. The witch asked why he thought that, since they were acting like son and mother. He was a little puzzled and told her that she was sharing a bed with such a big son. Philippa said they get along great and sleep very well together without any nuances. She asked where the child got the money to pay for the room. Colin said that he is no longer a child and can provide for himself and doesn't need to be treated like a little boy. He was leaving them and said he would come to dinner since you were in town and would pick up his things later. A young boy opened his kiosk in the city, and it became very even popular. His new friend said he should open a store and move to Craftsman Alley, as he would have more opportunities to make good money there. The man said the wax crafts are doing very well among the young ladies. He also said that if he moved to a new place, he would be able to create very expensive, beautiful candles, which would bring him very good money. The young man said he was not going to move because moving would bring a lot of hassle. The man looked at him with misunderstanding and told him that he was a father and should provide for his family since he wanted to give his daughter to a good man. Colin looked at him and said it wasn't his daughter. The one remained silent without saying anything. Lily sat near the young man's bench as a friend saw another familiar. The little girl had lost her master and was screaming at the top of her voice. The blonde witch told her not to talk like that in a public place. Keelan and Cordelia sat drinking tea, along with their familiars. They chatted casually, and the latter told his whole story after the last time they saw each other. The blonde witch was shocked that he had been living with her friend for 5 whole years. She was perplexed as to how this could be. After a little thought, she said that her Philippa had a good soul after all. Cordelia asked the young man if he agreed with her. He hesitated and decided to change the topic of conversation. Colin looked at the little girl and said she was very lovely, adding that the girl reminds him a lot of Mikhail. The witch said it couldn't be otherwise, since she changed her many times to make the girl look like him. The witch said the process itself was tedious and very hard. Colin asked how and what she was doing. He thought a witch could cast spells on a child of her womb. The witch laughed and said he made her laugh with his words. Laughing, Cordelia said she would never have a baby. She wouldn't want to mess up her body and gain excess weight. The young man was taken aback by such a statement and looked at her bewildered. The witch said it's actually her last name. She's an azure bird. For a witch, it wouldn't be too difficult to reincarnate a familiar into a son or daughter. The witch said with sadness in her voice that if she had borne another woman for her husband, he would have loved her and not the witch. After the meeting, Lily and Colin walked to the hotel. Lily said that witches love in different ways, but among themselves, their love looks the same. They came to the hotel and saw an incomprehensible and frightening picture. The witch was sitting near the table on a chair, and she was surrounded by bodies everywhere. The young youth looked at her. He realized in an instant why Lily was in such a hurry to see the witch. He asked what happened. Philippa replied that several men suddenly tried to grab her. The young man asked if she had killed them or not. The witch waved him off and said she hadn't killed them, and the red slurry around them was just a spilled bottle of strawberry wine. The young man walked up to one of the men and shoved a piece of bottle down his throat. The witch looked at him. By his action, he puzzled her. She asked what he was doing. Colin replied in a calm voice that since she hadn't killed them, he would do it instead. Philippa didn't understand why he was doing this. Colin looked at her and asked what she didn't understand about the situation. The witch couldn't get a word out. Not wanting to continue the conversation on the topic of murder any further, the young man asked where Lily was. Philippa said that Lily cast a mind manipulation spell on the innkeeper and the others who were present in the hotel. The witch looked at him and said with a smile on her face that with a spell they could all forget that the witch and the young man were mother and son. Colin said they could stop pretending, and he could settle down in this small town and open a shop that would bring in a good income in the men's artisan alley. The witch supported him, saying that he could then blend in with the crowd and live with the people, as he had wanted to do before. The crushed and lost young man asked her if she was not a mother to him, Then what was she? Without waiting for an answer, he said that he had had enough, and they parted, and each of them would live his own life, as the witch had wanted for a long time. Philippa looked at him and told him she would do as he wanted. And lastly, she will grant him one wish. Colin was a little puzzled, but grinned and asked her what kind of wish she wanted to give him. Philippa said she could fulfill anything. Looking at her, the confused and puzzled young man quietly whispered his wish. He sincerely hoped she could love him. Hearing this, the witch ran to him and threw her arms around him. She looked at him and said softly that she also loved him. He asked quietly, out of pity. In the last couple years of their lives, they had gotten married and started living like a real family. Their married life was like a fairy tale. But sadly, death came as unexpectedly as family life. The witch was very surprised when she saw him. He found her, a happy young man looking at her, and asked her if he looked weird with 2 arms, also adding that he's back. The witch and the young boy continued to meet, again and again. She was just as beautiful and young, and he changed his appearance many times, each time in a different country and format. Several times he came to her very late for which he apologized for making her wait so long. Other times he came too early and was very young, but luckily they were able to be together longer. Unfortunately, he was always taken away by sudden death. The witch reassured him, saying she was used to waiting for him by now, and it wouldn't be a problem for her to wait a little longer for him, since she had lived, and forever. After she said that, he got a little embarrassed. She laughed. Eons have changed since they last met. This time, the young man was very smart. He was even surprised that his project to build an Autobahn would be profitable in such a difficult time. He knew their plants were running at maximum capacity because of this project. The young boy was under constant surveillance by the communists, but that didn't stop him from making his wife happy. They spent time together, and she said she wanted him to make her a swing and a slide. They're in a very difficult time. Wars and coups haunted them. The man was on the phone and couldn't believe what he was being told. He was told that his men from the factory had been taken to the gas chambers as the purge was taking place. He was angrier than ever. Colin was furiously frustrated with people. He was also angry because of their nefarious deeds. He told his wife she was right. She began to reassure him, telling him that everyone has their faults. The witch said that flaws make people precious. The man said that it was not the first time she had said such words, but at the moment, he did not understand their meaning. Colin said that on his journey, he has seen a lot of kind people, also a lot of mentally challenged people. But what struck him most was his encounters with evil people. After thinking for a bit, he said he would go and deal with the bad people, and this time he would succeed, and they would be fine. Philippa laughed and said he looked like a hero. She asked him if he needed her witch's blessing. He only laughed at her suggestions and left. Unfortunately, his showdown didn't lead to anything good. The witch saw from the crowd his breathless body hanging there, giving no vital signs. She heard only the mere conversations of the men standing near her. Some knew him and admired what he did, and some despised him. They said he was a communist boss. Some said death suited him very well. The witch stood and listened to all their talk. She was struck by their words. Philippa knew that death was commonplace at such times, but after their angry words toward her husband, she was very angry. Philippa used attack magic and killed everyone. She asked Lily how she was feeling, adding that in all her time she never learned how to control such magic. It was the first time she'd ever killed a witch in her entire life. Lily had never seen such an atrocity before. It is impossible to say for sure what thoughts were raging in the woman's head at that moment. For a while, she still sat by her husband's breathless body, but gathering her strength, Philippa decided to leave him. Unfortunately, no one else saw her or could find her. A group of young girls and a stranger were walking down the road. They were a little upset about having to cross the river, instead of taking the road. Unfortunately, they had no other choice, since the bridge was closed, and the only way to get into the city was through the river where the killer sharks swam. The young individuals were socializing among themselves. They wanted to find some cozy place so they could dry off and get some rest. They saw a hotel that was in good condition and not even touched during the war. They were very much surprised by this. When they entered the hotel, everyone stared at them intently as they didn't expect to see strangers in such a place. All the locals knew the bridge was closed, so that strangers could only get to their town through the river. They were very surprised by this, as there are killer sharks there. One of the local men looked at the strangers and said they were very suspicious. He pointed out one man in particular who looked very strange as he wore a dark hood. The innkeeper came up to them and told him not to bother the new visitors, since she hadn't had any new guests in a while, and she had to survive wartime somehow. To ease the tension a bit between the guests and the older attendees, the hooded man said he was treating everyone and the drinks were on him. Everyone sat and drank drinks, while talking about the progress of the war and the latest news. One of the men present said that their protector had returned. They praised him as he protected civilians and destroyed dragons and demons. One of the men present pulled off the stranger's hood, and everyone saw his face. They were shocked because it was a simple man. But unfortunately, in such a difficult time, the human race was almost all exterminated, and they did not expect in any way to see a common man in such a strange place. Everyone in the establishment saw that the man was missing one arm, and they realized that this was no ordinary man. It was their savior, the one-armed Black Storm. They were surprised as they didn't understand why he would fight for the chimeras. The young man said race has no impact on helping those around him. Everyone present was shocked by his words. They asked him to tell us about his last battle. They wanted to know everything, how he killed the dragon. Men asked him to show the sword with which he had slain dragons and all manner of evil. They animatedly hovered around him and questioned him about all his exploits. His chimera girlfriends looked at him and weren't even surprised at this turn of events anymore, since they knew that there was always lively action going on near the man. A young boy met with an older man. Toth asked him why he chose to fight on the side of the chimeras, since man has always been against chimeras. Colin said he didn't hate them as he grew up with them, and was also an outcast among humans as he was inferior in their eyes. Colin says he wants to defeat evil and remove tyranny forever. The drunken man started telling different stories, so he also began to tell a story about a scary woman about a witch, which brought everyone nothing but misfortune. Colin is shocked to learn that the woman's name is Philippa. He was amazed to the core, as they had crossed other parallel universes, but yet their paths crossed with each other. The girls, along with Colin, were walking toward the demon lord. The girls were a little puzzled by the fact that very few soldiers were encountered on their way, but they thought that the demon lord was already losing his grip. Colin went forward, and on his way he met a little girl. As he walked on, he saw a red-haired woman and told her that her lock was in very bad shape. She looked at him and asked where the other girls were. He said he wouldn't talk about other girls in her presence. She asked how he could leave his comrades alone. Colin looked at her and said it was the worst place she'd ever had to live. He asked how long it had been since they last saw each other. Looking at her, he also added how could she do such a thing. The witch said she couldn't stand the presence of people she didn't like the way they breathed. She was annoyed by their presence, their smile, their actions. He calmly approached her and told her that the main reason she did what she did was to get people killed. Colin decided to lighten the mood and made a little joke about his death. The witch was furious at his words. She asked how he could joke about such a topic. It pained her to see him killed, since he only wanted to help people, and they hung him and threw stones at his breathless, hanging body. He hugged her and told her that everything would be okay now since he was there for her, and they could make a happy life. She looked and only laughed, saying there would be no such thing since he was a hero, and he should end things now. He was very surprised by her words, and didn't understand why she would want to do such a thing. Philippa said if he didn't, she would destroy this world and go to another, wait for him for ages. Witches live forever. He didn't want to do it, but the witch asked him to. She said she had never asked him for anything before, not flowers, not gifts. She wanted him to do it with his hand. He was enraged from her saying that he would rather she asked for jewelry or some gifts, or get a star from the sky. He'd done everything for her, but he couldn't do something like this. As always, with the same names with the same faces, the boy and the witch looked at each other. The young man was covered in blood. His girlfriends ran up to him and asked if he was okay, because they saw blood on him, and there was a lot of it. The one only said he was fine, and they should get out soon as the castle was about to collapse. Their victory over the dark forces was celebrated all around them. They couldn't believe it was over. And he defeated the wicked witch after years of tyranny. It was over in a flash, everyone present praising him. Everyone was screaming that he was a hero, and he saved them. It was also said that he brought proof of his victory. They saw the witch's hair. The witch asked him to cut off her head with his sword before she cast the spell. She frantically wished he would end it before she destroyed the world where they lived. Everyone around him was chanting his name, saying he was a hero. But unfortunately, he wasn't happy about it. He wanted to be with the witch, but Colin couldn't understand her sadness. He had done what she wanted. He had become a hero to others. He knew that in this world their love was over, but he promised to wait for her all his life, even if she didn't come. Then, in other worlds, now he would wait for her forever. For a witch, a familiar is like a part of herself. Likewise, a familiar is an expression of power. That's why witches take many animals and make a contract with them. However, when they try to escape, the witch cuts off their limbs. Despite this, the animals still try to escape. Lily knew that her mistress Philippa was different from other witches. I mean, she was crazy. The witches sat around drinking tea and discussing their animals. One witch was very concerned that when she applied her magic, her animal ran away. The witches were discussing not only their familiars, but also people. Philippa said they were really nice, and she saw 2 guys stand up for another guy 3 days ago. The other witches asked her to tell more. Lily looked at her in bewilderment. She knew the witch had her own plans, and was surprised that she still hadn't had a first love. But when the witch did have her first love, it was something to watch forever. Lily was skeptical about the young boy. She asked the witch why she chose that particular smarmy boy. Lily said she wouldn't be as fooled as her mistress. They sat around the fire. He slid her some food. Lily said he didn't want to, and he couldn't bribe her with food. But when I took a bite of it and tasted it, I was very pleased. Lily knew that her mistress wasn't just playing at love and family. Ta had truly raging feelings for the boy. Philippa will continue to wait for him for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The witch fell in love with him anew each time and had fierce feelings for him. But unfortunately, those feelings quickly broke her. Lily knew that this was the 15th world they had moved to since he had been brutally murdered. The witch destroyed everyone who caught her eye, even if they weren't human. Lily was telling her mistress that she should stop and asked her what she was going to accomplish by doing so. Colin told his girlfriends that he was going alone and they shouldn't follow them. Lily knew they came in 5 dimensions. Yet still they met and wondered why now. She knew there was nothing else left. Her mistress is a madwoman, and the boy has become a hero. And all they had left was death. After everything Lily had seen, she no longer believed in love, and said she didn't like it anymore. Lily stood in the rain and cried. Her whole world shattered in an instant. She knew that love had destroyed their whole happy life. Lily lay on the grass and thought that her mistress had acted very rashly this time, as they had not made a proper contract. And she didn't leave with her. She knew they probably wouldn't meet again. But also knew it was the best option. Since she didn't like love and didn't want to experience the same feelings as her mistress, her thoughts were interrupted by a young man. It was the general who approached her while he was making his rounds of the grounds. He asked her what she was so young doing here. She asked him to leave and stay out of her way. The witches sat and chatted about politics, witchcraft. They were discussing each other. One of the witches said they were having trouble with the blonde witch, since it preys indiscriminately on all humans. Cordelia looked and said that her sister was balking at the unpleasantness with her, but if she so desired, he could set them up for her. But the girl said she is just worried about her condition, as her actions are causing people to start hunting them down. Casterline asked if she should play love instead of hunting. The blonde witch was very angry with them and said that instead of attacking her, they could do something useful. As she left, she insulted them all several times. Everyone was excited and shocked by her words and behavior. Her grandmother said she hadn't met a witch like Cordelia in 1,000 years. She asked her to calm down and stop. The witch was very angry and decided to go on a little hunting trip. Unfortunately for her, the hunt turned out badly for her. Disheveled and covered in blood, she sat near a tree and waited for the man to come. They were furiously discussing her. They wanted to possess it, to be the first before anyone saw it and took it away. The witch heard all this, but promised to kill them. She wasn't going to give up so easily. The disheveled witch was seen by a young boy. He and other adults browsed the forest to catch and kill her. He was agitated and scared. The witch knew that if he called the adults, she would kill them all, and later they would kill her. The boy stood there, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, he heard his name being called, asking if he had found something or not. He threw his jacket on the witch in a hurry and shouted that he found nothing. He said he just saw a bird and was scared of it. He went to his father and he asked where his jacket was. The boy mewed timidly and said he was just scared of the gunshot and didn't know where he was. My father looked at it. He was very angry because that jacket was very expensive, but he said that he shouldn't have brought it with him after all. And he asked me not to tell my mom. The witch sat and looked at the jacket with confusion. She wondered why the young boy had helped her. The witches saw the chaos in their dwelling. But it was only a blonde witch, a young witch. She was very angry and frightened. She screamed that she had fallen in love with a man, and she didn't understand why it was happening to her. Cordelia screamed that such a thing was impossible and that she couldn't fall in love with an ordinary boy. Philippa cried out that falling in love with a human child was the most wonderful thing possible. The blonde girl was furious at her words. She cried, and Philippa put her arms around her and comforted her. The witch asked what was wrong with her. Maybe she's just sick, and it's not love at all. Philippa reassured her, telling her it wasn't an illness and she would be fine. Philippa suggested she take it and walk. They went to the play. Philippa was very glad they went to a play about love. But Cordelia didn't see it that way. She sat and thought about the little boy, who is only 9 years old and she is 90. She didn't understand why she had fallen in love with him. She had no reason to love him, and she kept telling herself that it wasn't true, that she wasn't in love. But after watching the play, she realized that there was no reason for love, and she loves him for nothing. A little girl was walking and entered the property of an old grandmother who practiced healing herbs. With a scream, she ran from her. Her grandmother yelled at her not to go near her persimmon tree. Her mother began to defend her and said that because of such actions, the old woman would not be able to marry off her granddaughter. The old woman looked at her and said that she had no granddaughter and that she was just delusional. The woman looked at her in surprise. She had no idea how an old woman could forget her family, adding that she only has one granddaughter. The girl came out and told the woman she was sorry, and apologized to her, telling her that my grandmother has temporary memory problems. The children who were walking heard the noise and were frightened. They knew that the noise was coming from the old woman's house. They thought there was some kind of fight as they heard dishes breaking. The old woman shouted uncontrollably that the girl was no relation to her, and that it was some kind of lie, and that she had been sent by the mayor to ask her for alms. She screamed that she wouldn't give a penny. She subsequently beat the young beauty. The young witch thought the old woman would be of great use to her. She was brainwashing her. Everyone thought she was her granddaughter, but the old woman was somehow immune to magic. Cordelia didn't understand why this was happening. She had heard that some people had a resistant immunity to magic. Cordelia wondered why this particular problem was happening now. She wanted to just kill her so she didn't have to worry about it, so she said it out loud. The woman was furiously surprised. You could feel the fear in her gaze. She flew outside in a rush of emotion and saw the young children outside her house. She screamed for them to call for adult help, since the witch wants to kill her. The children ran scattering and shouted that the old woman had gone mad and was just calling her granddaughter a witch. The woman clenched her fists and shouted at them that they were all crazy. And it's not her granddaughter at all. One of the boys asked her to calm down and pull herself together. The boy was dumbfounded and excited when he saw the young girl who came out of the house. The blonde girl was battered and bloody. She looked at him with wide open eyes and couldn't say anything. The old woman screamed at him not to look at her and that they were stupid children since they couldn't realize she was a witch. The girl looked at the young boy and didn't understand what was going on, whether he believes the old woman or not. After their afternoon skirmish, the blonde witch was very angry. She trashed half the old woman's house. The old woman shouted at her to calm down there, but the girl was furious. She couldn't control her anger and screamed that her love for the boy was useless. She'll kill him and she'll destroy the whole town. As she walked outside, she saw the letter. One look at it and realized who sent it. She saw the lovely scrawled handwriting. It was her young adorer writing. Mikael asked her to forgive him for not telling her personally everything he felt and apologized to her that he couldn't help since he was still young. He asked her to wait until he grew up and became strong, and then he would help her. The blonde girl stood reading the letter as a friend came out from behind an old woman and asked her why she had stopped. She asked a question and wanted to know the answer. She frantically wanted to know what her new plan was, and, what she's going to do next. The witch turned to her and said that she was a very rude and worthless person. The old woman looked at her with fury. She hadn't expected such words from a witch. The girl was sure that she would suffer for the old woman, but she was pleased that the young boy was worried about her and sent a letter, and with it a rose. The old woman continued to frantically yell at her and threaten her with a knife. Cordelia looked at her and used her magic to sit her down in a chair. The witch approached her and said she knew that the old woman had been stealing the money and belongings of the common townspeople. The girl said she would keep quiet to the last while there sitting still. She suggested she team up. The next day, the blonde girl walked around looking at the flower the young man had given her. She was very glad that he had written her a letter. It made her love him even more. Just as suddenly, she saw a young little girl as well. She was the daughter of the owner of the healing herb house. She had heard that her father was very abusive and was not surprised to see her very wrinkled. She was beaten. A young boy came up to her and gave her a flower. She accepted it. Cordelia was surprised and very angry. She was furiously punching the tree and screaming that she would kill anyone who came near her. She cried, for she thought the young boy had given the letter and the rose only to her. Philippa asked her to calm down, saying that it was just that the boy was very kind, and he decided to comfort the battered girl. The blonde witch yelled that she didn't want him to be nice to everyone. She wants him to be kind only to her alone. Later, Cordelia and her grandmother walked past the townspeople. One of the women asked if her grandmother had been diagnosed with anything. The girl said yes. The grandmother replied that no one should talk to her as she was a witch and would harm them. Everyone stood and looked at her. The old woman also told the children not to come and use her well. Cordelia saw her father bullying the girl again. He yelled that the one was clumsy, only ruining the product and lowering their sales. He said he would teach her a good lesson when they got home. All the men walked by with a smile on their faces as they saw the father beating his daughter. Only one boy stood watching with a fierce gaze. He wanted to help the girl, but unfortunately he was too small, and from the man's rage he could get hurt and die himself. Cordelia wished he no longer existed so that she could get on with her life normally. When she got home, she sat and pondered how she could kill him. She was angry with herself for sitting and contemplating and worrying about one person. The witch didn't understand why the boy had given her that flower, why all she can think about is him. And finally, why is it that when a girl gets beaten, a boy cares so much about her? The witch was frustrated and didn't understand why love could be so painful. She wanted to cast a spell on everyone. All worry vanished in an instant when she heard a noise outside. She knew the old woman hadn't returned yet, since she started leaving the house more often. Going outside, the girl saw the letter and the rose. She was delighted with this lovely gift, and she didn't understand why he had sent it to her again, for she was very different from that little fragile girl. She was very pleased. Hearing a noise in the backyard, she decided to go there. When she arrived, she saw a gruesome sight. Her grandmother lay dead. The man was dead, and the girl was the only one standing there looking at it all. She asked her what was wrong, but the frightened girl could not say anything. The father was furious and again beat the girl. He shouted that she had broken a vial of medicine, and that was why all the potion makers looked down on them. He asked her if she realized what they thought of him. The other man came up to her and hugged her and said it wasn't the girl's fault that he hadn't sold all the drugs, since they just like the blonde girl, and that's what everyone buys from them. The drunken man yelled that the grandmother and her granddaughter had become very annoying lately, and he didn't want them to get in their way. He said he'd kill her. Taking the snare, he went to them, shouted that he would teach them a lesson, for all they had was a well and a persimmon tree. He didn't understand who they thought they were. The girl ran after him and shouted at him to calm down, as he had a lot to drink. Thoth yelled for her to be quiet, or he would test the snare on her. When she saw her grandmother, the girl shouted at her not to go there and to go another way, as it was very dangerous, and her father was coming to harm her. But Granny didn't listen to her and continued on her way. The old woman paid for her ignorance and fell into the trap. The man also paid for his behavior. He drank water from the well, which the old woman poisoned. The little girl was in frantic shock. She couldn't believe her eyes. Cordelia looked to see what had happened and saw that the old woman had poisoned the well. She poured some laprax juice in it. She said one sip could kill a man. The little girl stood and watched. She said she didn't do it. The witch said the old woman did it. The blonde witch calmed her down, telling her that now they wouldn't bully her and beat her like that. A lot happened in one night. A lot of people died. They knew they were accidents. One man was furious. He asked his friend why he didn't stop him. But the man was no less enraged and said he had done his best, but the man wouldn't listen to him. The people who were standing in the cemetery asked them not to swear, as there was no time for that now. The blonde girl was crying furiously. Everyone felt very sorry for her, for they knew she was an orphan, and everyone said she was suffering a lot. The girl was not crying because the old woman was dead, because now there was no one to abuse her, and the young man would not feel sorry for her and pay attention to her. The young boy walked over to the witch and hugged her. He said that even though she was alone, she had to be strong. Everyone looked at them. They were discussing the little girl who stood there without shedding a single tear. People didn't understand how she could not cry, for her father had died. They were shocked, even though he wasn't very good, but still a father is a father. They judged her at first and said she couldn't accomplish anything. But after a couple years, she went to the big city, and when they heard the news about her, they rejoiced. And they said they always believed in her and never once doubted that she could reach such heights. There were no more scapegoats left in the small town, and now people started bullying the little boy who was missing one arm. After all the girls, he was the only one left. Men are sick of bullying the little boy. They switched to Cordelia. They mocked her and also wanted to touch her. She decided to leave the town and told her friend about it, who said they needed to add some drama before leaving. And I told her she'd have it all set up. Young Philippa was carrying out her plan. The blonde girl watched from afar and realized that this was out of bounds. She told her it was too childish. But still, her plan worked very well. After those actions, everyone went around cursing Cordelia. The young boy grabbed the witch and told her not to go home since Philippa had stolen the tomatoes again, and you want to make an outcast out of her. But when he realized what he had done, he began to embarrass himself and apologize. She calmed him down by telling him everything was fine and asked him why he didn't write her letters. He said he met Rita at night, and that's why he didn't hand over the letter. He apologized to her again for grabbing her so suddenly and said he had been overly careless, even though he was in a hurry. The girl told him to stop apologizing since she was used to it, so it was okay. He was perplexed. She said that yesterday, the owner of the cigarette store also grabbed her. The young man was furious and asked if she was okay or not. The girl calmed him down and told him she was fine and had managed to break free, and remembered that she had secretly made him impotent that night. She said a man from the town had very bad words for her. The boy said that was no reason to touch her without her consent. She went up to him and told him he could touch her whenever he wanted. She let him. He distanced himself from her and told her it was too early for them to do such a thing, and asked her not to do it again. Leaving, he said she was not a thief or a girl of easy virtue. So she didn't do anything wrong, and she's very nice. She stood there, seeing him off with a look, and knew he was right. A month later, Philippa left town as a witch. The girls stood and reasoned what had happened. The blonde witch said that Philippa didn't need to go that far. But that one said she liked the boy and just wanted to help her. Cordelia said that even if many thousands of years passed, she would help her with anything she asked. Philippa laughingly said that she would be fine, and that it had been a very fun and highly entertaining experience for her. A young boy was telling a blonde girl that his friend was missing, and nobody cares about him. He was worried about him, as he couldn't wander off somewhere alone and get into trouble. But she would know that he had gone with Philippa and was in no danger. She told her young friend that the boy would be fine. After a long chat, Makoel proposed to his young witch. She was shocked because she knew he was worthy of more. Not just marry an orphan. People wouldn't stop gossiping about her. But still, she became the most beautiful bride in the world, and her husband, but also the most beautiful groom. Makoel came home with a smile on his face and said he brought groceries. The blonde maiden knew that all her troubles and disagreements with her mother-in-law were nothing compared to the fact that she had a man she loved. The witch felt bad for herself. She couldn't take this kind of treatment anymore. She expressed everything to her mother-in-law. There was furious as the daughter-in-law said ugly words right in front of her friend. The witch couldn't understand why her friend Philippa thought humans were so nice. The girl was tired of such treatment and decided to take a little revenge on her mother-in-law by using magic. Suddenly, her beloved husband came into the house. It took her by surprise. All the guests started running out of the house in a hurry, and her mother-in-law looked at her and told her son that his wife had caused the whole commotion and she was even worse than that old woman, saying that that one was a true witch. He started to leave the house in a hurry. Lastly, he told his mom that he was no longer a boy to be scolded for a long time. They were leaving, his mother yelling that he couldn't leave as it was his house. He said, without turning around, that this was Cordelia's house, and she should leave just like that. They walked away, and everyone frantically threw glances in their direction. His mother didn't stop and kept yelling that the girl had really spoiled him, since he used to be a very good boy. She sobbed at the doorstep and shouted with all her anger that the girl was a witch, and that she's leading him around. The girl clutched at her chest as she realized that her mother-in-law's words were partly true, but she didn't bewitch him. They moved to the big city. They had nothing with them. It was quite normal. Her husband was constantly apologizing that they were so poor. They went to look for work, came to a man in a big city who could give them a job. He looked at them and said he couldn't find anything for a man. He looked at the woman and said she was capable of a lot, and he could find something for her. Hearing these words, the young man took his wife, thanked her, and said they would find work elsewhere. He was angry at everyone and apologized to his wife for leaving the small town without even preparing. She looked around at everyone and saw that there were a lot of women walking along the road. She realized that there were a lot of working women in the city. That's when she got the idea to start a cosmetics business. She prepared some food and sent her familiar to sell it. The girl was doing very well. A young witch has created a product that can easily wash off makeup. Men were a little perplexed, and they said that women are constantly putting on several hours of makeup to wash off all that beauty in one fell swoop is too incomprehensible for their logic. But when women heard this, they ran to the girl and gave all their money to buy the cleanser. With the proceeds from the sales, they bought themselves a beautiful 2-story house. They were very happy about it. Their peace didn't last long. They had other concerns. As they were leaving in the late afternoon, they heard a noise coming from the yard. A woman had a very loud argument with her husband, who was perplexed as to why she had not cooked him a meal. She would tell him she had just gotten home from work and hadn't had time to get everything ready yet, but he was at the factory and yelled that she was earning a pittance. She's also not the only one in the family who works. The witch said it was none of their business, but when a young girl was beaten very badly by her husband, Mikhail brought her home and helped treat the wound. He apologized for bringing her into the house, but there was no way he could get past her. His wife understood this as he was very kind. A witch opened a cosmetics store and offered a girl to work for her. She showed her the paperwork that showed her salary. The woman was overjoyed at this turn of events and thanked her frantically. When she started earning much more than her husband, who quit, she came to Mikhail and cried frantically, because of the fact that he doesn't even watch the kids, saying he wants to open his own store. Witch expanded her store and made a children's corner on the second floor. The girl was very happy and thanked them, saying she would do anything and give it her best. The witch would come home every time and see her beloved husband picking up and bringing in battered women. The witch was furious and also puzzled as to why men could do this to poor girls. Suddenly, it wasn't the beaten girl who came to them, but Mikhail's sister Shir. He was glad she had stopped by to see them, and asked how long they hadn't seen each other. She said it was a very long time, so long that she had time to get married already. The young beauty told the witch that she had heard they had started a big enterprise. Cordelia said they just opened a small store. The girl interrupted her and said let her not even be modest there, as she knew they had opened outstanding businesses, which brings in a very good income. She asked her if she wanted to expand the service, if she wanted to team up with her as she began to learn about cosmetics. The witch agreed. Shirley had every right to run the entire firm. The girl met with the working women and told them that they could do everything and asked them to try very hard. The witch wanted to buy out the 3rd floor and purchase the whole building so she wouldn't have to pay rent. She got her way. They had a children's center on the 3rd floor, a beauty salon on the 2nd floor, and cosmetics on the 1st floor. She got rid of all interference. Returning home and her beloved husband was waiting for her, she was very happy. When they were alone together, he asked her if it was time for them to have a baby. Man lives to continue his species. Every living creature mates and reproduces. The girl stood and pondered how tired she was of her husband. But she was told she had been divorced for a long time. The girl said she couldn't stand him, but their baby is a very good sweetheart, and he's taking care of her now. Another girl said she liked that her son looked like her husband since he was already in heaven. And when she looks at him, she is constantly reminded of her husband. The witch knew that survival instincts and emotions brought people together, but she didn't need that. The mere thought of having to share her husband with someone else terrified her, especially if that someone is female. The man was very happy. He said he was very hopeful that their baby girl would be like his wife. He told her that now the three of them could hold hands and walk around, all together, and it would be a lot of fun. Cordelia was very scared. She ran to her witch sisters and asked for their help. After many attempts, they still did what she asked them to do. She decided to make sure no one suspected her of being a witch. She knew she had to pretend she was having a baby. There were women sitting in the hospital. They were very upset. Since their hospital is made for women only, but it does not generate any income and they do not have a single patient. A white-haired witch came rumbling into their hospital and asked if she could give birth in their hospital. She said she would pay them a lot of money and rents an entire floor from them, but she also asked them not to let anyone come in. After she showered them with money at the hospital, they cleaned up the building and were frantically happy. Such a twist of fate. They also didn't have a midwife, and the blonde witch brought her friend to help her and be there for her. Her friend told her that her husband would be here soon, so she got ready for the arduous process. The girl sat exhausted, but very glad, holding my little baby in my arms. The witch knew that her husband would be happy now too, since he got the real family he'd dreamed of for a long time. At work, all the female co-workers were whispering about what a good husband their boss had. He was always polite and kind and performed all household duties. She could hear them whispering. It really hurt her, as she didn't want to share her favorite young little boy, whom she had loved since she was 9 years old, with anyone. He was young and very kind and hasn't changed a bit since then. When young women left work, they were always waited on by men, namely a bunch of bandits, who always complained that the women had stolen their jobs. The girls were discussing them. They knew they were common thugs. Men were trying to reach with their nasty hands, not only to the girls who were working, but also to their boss. One late evening, when the girls went home and closed their office for the night, the bandits got in. They were looking at the merchandise and discussing what they could steal. They were furious and wrecking everything in their path. Not only did they wreck everything around them, they saw the boss's hottie and told her not to blame them as they were just doing their own thing. They wanted to capture and abuse the other girls, but the blonde witch wouldn't let them. In a fit of rage and anger, she used magic and killed them all. The blonde witch was covered in blood, as was her fiercely beautiful dress. She was accidentally seen by her husband's sister. In a fit of fear, she decided to run away. But she was stopped by a witch, caught her, hugged her, and calmed her down, held her until she ran away again. She asked her girlfriend what she would do if others also saw it. The witch asked what she was going to do about it. She said she would probably blow up the building and go to another city. Her husband's sister heard this and said she couldn't do that. The girls were at a loss as to what she was talking about. She looked and said the witch hadn't done anything, and they weren't here at all. The witch remembered everything as she sat in the clean office. She knew that those men were very famous and that they might be wanted. They were all seen coming in late in the evening. The blonde witch didn't understand why she was in such trouble and torment. She did everything in her power. She worked hard. Even her friend Philippa could tell that one had done a very good job, but that it wasn't enough. That same day, her husband came to her with a crying daughter in his arms. He said strangers broke into their home. They said one was from the militia, but he was sure it wasn't. He said that they started smashing their house and beating him. So he had to run away, out of the house, taking one bag and his child. He was covered in blood. They asked him if he was okay. As men burst into their building, they were angry. One of the men told the ladies to calm down as they just wanted to talk to their store owner. They said they just wanted to talk to the owner, but hesitated to say which. The girl was scared. She didn't want her husband to know the truth about her. She didn't want him to reveal her terrible secret. One of the men said he was aware that his boys had gone out late at night here, and he doesn't believe they're just missing. He said he had witnesses, very many witnesses. A lot of people saw his men going in to see them. The blonde witch stood staring at him intently. She didn't know what to answer. He frantically kept saying she was a witch and humiliated her in front of everyone. His words made Mika laugh and apologized, saying he should have been a little more collected, but he can't help himself from saying such things to a man. The gang leader didn't ask how one could laugh at a time like this. He asked who Mika was, the witch's husband or her slave. After he said that, he laughed even more. They all continued to make noise, but the little girl sat and listened to this ridiculous squabble. Some laughed, others shouted in anger. Mika laughed and thought back to their young teenage years when they were in a small town. His wife was also called a witch, and here she was also called a witch. The gang leader laughed and said that even the witch's husband admitted that she was a witch and he was her slave. The young girls who worked at the factory were laughing furiously at his words. He was angry. He shouted that not everyone was a witch and called them out for realizing their deeds, and stopped laughing at him. He pointed his fingers at them and said, not all the witch girls were laughing and turning the tables on each other, asking one to the other, which one is really the witch? The blonde maiden stood looking at everything that was going on, and was frantically misunderstanding what had just happened. Why they're laughing? She stood looking at all these people, and realized that people from the city were completely different. In her small town, she was bullied and despised, and in the big city, things happened much more easily. She looked at her husband and thought that in all her life, she had never seen him as joyful and laughing as he was now. She looked at her husband and smiled fiercely herself, for there was nothing more pleasing and joyful to her than when he looked at her with that big, beautiful smile. The gang owner was very angry as everyone was laughing at him. Because they decided to embarrass him, the people who came with him tried to calm him down. But everything was even. The blonde witch stood with her beloved husband holding hands. She knew that people were very naive and stupid, but her husband wasn't like that. He made her happy. She loved him. She was willing to do anything for her love. And so the boy and the girl lived happily ever after, like any other fairy tale. But in a slightly odd way, they had another witch's love. The witch and the boy lived many happy years. A happier time the witch had never known in all her long years of existence. The girls were sitting in a cafe discussing women's cosmetics. One of the girls was telling the other that her great-grandmother never used another brand of cosmetics. She really liked the brand by only one company, which was very good in quality. She said they were very successful, and that someone wrote that the founder is a witch, and even the customers are called witches. The representatives of the company at one time decided to capitalize on the moment of fame and popularity that they even named the company Witch's Boutique. The girl asked how she knew so much. She said her great-grandmother was the deputy president. The girl stood crying furiously. She was asked by one of the witches why she was standing there instead of going to her father and spending the last moments of her life with him. She just said that the landlady told her to be here. The witch and the boy lived together for over 50 years. And on his last moments of breathing, he lay on the bed with tenderness in his eyes and a smile on your face, talking to his beautiful wife. He said he felt very young. Cordelia sat beside his bed and wept furiously. She told him that since he had become an old grandfather, he was fine and handsome, both now and in my younger years. He thought back to his sister, who had been taken by the epidemic. He said he was being very foolish in front of his beloved wife. The man told her that they spent a lot of time with her and they had a very good relationship. But unfortunately, a lot of trials, which luckily they overcame and walked together to the end. The blonde witch didn't realize what she could do. She wanted to use magic, to use necromancy, to do anything so that the young man could live for many thousands of years with her. She wanted him to know she was a witch. He looked at her with tenderness in his eyes and said she looked like his first love, from his former youth. She looked at him bewildered, not sure what to answer. He said that when he was 9, he visited his relatives who lived very far away. She didn't understand why he was saying this now. She wondered if people really do get dumb and say strange things before old age or at the moment of death. He talked about how his mother took his young sister's savings and bought him a new jacket, adding that his mother never bought even small hairpins for his sisters. But unfortunately, his mom never saw that jacket again. The girl didn't understand why he was telling her this. She could only accept the fact that she was very much like his first love. Sobbing, she berated herself for not having met her husband earlier, when he was very young, or even an infant. The man went on to tell his story. He said his mom hadn't seen the jacket because of the sudden witch hunt in town. So they went looking for the witch. He knew there was no witch hunt, and the lustful men just wanted to find and rape the girl. And that's when he first saw the wounded, beaten, innocent girl. The witch realized it was her the moment she fell in love with him. She was very happy to hear this from him. He said the girl was beautiful, and he fell in love with her at first sight. He asked his wife if she wanted to beat the tree, or trample the ground, or do something else. She was at a loss as to what he was talking about. He said he had seen her in anger as an infant. The way she did all those things, he said he really liked it when she tried to look really nice in front of him. She asked him if he would love her then, when he found out she was a witch. He looked at her in his gaze, reading a furious misunderstanding. She looked and laughed, and said she was speaking figuratively, as she had heard it many times as a child, and even now hears her address such words. He looked at her, love, respect, and understanding in his eyes. He said she had always been his love and wife. He just smiled and said she was his sweet witch. The girl looked at him and realized that even if he came back to life, he couldn't go back to their unforgettable moments. Even if he could go back to that moment, he wouldn't say the same words to her. Her husband looked at her and said he didn't care who she was. He loved her and would continue to love her forever, saying he would keep their moments in his memory. With tears in her eyes, she looked and said she also loved him and would treasure all their moments in her heart. She knew she had to finish here and now. It is the most humane and beautiful thing to do. She wanted to tell her friend Philippa her beautiful love story. She wanted to tell the whole world of her fierce love that would live with her forever. It was her wonderful, unforgettable fairy tale.